What's up, everybody? Happy Friday. Hope everybody enjoyed the holiday yesterday for Juneteenth with the markets closed. I know it was a banking holiday in the States. Hope everybody caught the live stream yesterday, live from Germany. Shad was doing it live from Mary Jane, Berlin. Had a lot of good guests on. Jürgen from Stores and Bickel. I think Pablo was on there as well. We had represented Torsten from 420 Pharma, which is Curaleaf's affiliate in Germany. And he actually just wrapped up an interview with Mike Tyson, which was a pre-record, which we're going to be, I think, coming out with either tomorrow or Monday, obviously pertaining to rescheduling, regulations moving forward, and kind of what you've been seeing around Tyson's tweets. Shad sat down with Mike for, I think, about 10 minutes on site in Germany. Today, we're going to have Adam Terry on, CEO of Cantrip, and then we're going to have Trent Woloveck on from Jushi. Shad might be actually joining at the second half of the podcast. And thought it was something that was interesting this morning. I kind of just wanted to cover. But I know Adam had tweeted out he was excited to join TDR. And then Jim Higdon decided to put, "Can't wait to hear what the angry MSO fucksticks have to say about this appearance." Jim, really, I don't really think that's our audience. But most of our audience actually really enjoys when Adam comes on. And all of them pretty much support his product. So there's some lessons in there. I wouldn't let the Twitter trolls get to you that much, but might want to shape up how you're conducting yourself on Twitter, being the CEO of one of the companies. Without further ado, let's get into Adam. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while. How's it going, sir? How you been?
Good. How you doing, Anthony?
Good. Been a lot going on. I know regulatorily. I'm sure we'll jump into that. Obviously, been enjoying seeing the growth of the business on Twitter, what you guys have going on, and seeing a lot of end caps in retail and growth of the brand. So I guess without diving into the regulatory stuff, off the jump, how are you doing? How's the brand doing? How's the state of the industry doing? What's new?
We're doing great. Thanks for asking. It's been definitely an interesting first half of this year, primarily due to those regulatory changes that you've been insinuating. A lot of times it's not actually even a full change that goes into effect. I think, as we know in the cannabis industry generally, sometimes just there's an influence on the marketplace based on just where we think legislators are going, and that can change the behavior of distributors and retailers. So there's been a bit of an impact, I think, on the marketplace. But the THC drinks marketplace across this country is still expanding rapidly. Top brands are, I think, extending their lead. A lot of new brands are coming in, though. We're seeing a lot of different things that we're used to seeing in the cannabis industry, like people trying to come to market with a bunch of money, drop the price by offering, similar products at half the cost of everybody else. And I'll be honest, I've seen that, that happened in Massachusetts 4 or 5 times. I've never seen it actually work. The top dogs who were there early in the Massachusetts market at, reasonable prices were still the top dogs after everybody tried to undercut them by a lot. So we'll see how the consumer responds to that. But yeah, it's been bumpy in Florida. Obviously, it's been pretty bumpy in Texas. But a lot of these marketplaces are still thriving, and most places did not succeed in banning anything this session. And so it's been an interesting ride through the first half of 2025 as we see a lot more adoption by both retailers and distributors across the country.
How are you thinking about brand? With Cantrip, obviously the doctor product was great. I know you have the orange soda product. Some of your products do mimic traditional fountain drinks. Has that been a big key to your success, and is that gravitating with consumers versus some of the other flavors that we've seen? I know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's a blackberry huckleberry formula, or blackberry.
We have blackberry lavender.
Lavender. That's correct.
Yeah.
Is the consumer going towards those traditional beverages that are infused?
It's an interesting question, because I think the market breaks down into a few different consumers. I'm remembering that different types of beverages have different audiences, and then different doses have different audiences. I think the first thing that's become clear over the last 6 to 12 months is that consumers do prefer stronger products, generally speaking. The thesis originally of the beverage industry, and this was included for Cantrip way back in 2020 when I started pitching the company, is, we started as just a 3 milligram THC brand. Everything that we produced for the dispensaries was 3 mgs THC. Can is famously a 2 milligram THC brand. Wink has 2.5 milligrams. But as the industry has progressed and consumers are starting to find what works for them, overwhelmingly people are moving towards either 5 at minimum or more likely 10 milligrams. And now there's
Okay.
definitely we find a strong audience also in the above 10 milligram range, but the core of the business, and I think the core of both where most states are moving, where a lot of customers are moving, is 10 milligrams. I mean, it's got to the point where you can't even launch a 5 milligram in Minnesota anymore. Not if you at least expect to get a distributor, because they just won't pick up anything 5 milligrams at this point. So it's becoming tough, particularly because I do think we're going to see at least a few big markets. Like, if California does come back one day, it'll be a 5 milligram limit. I'm pretty confident. Same if New York comes back in a strong way. And New York's its own regulatory mess right now. But so there'll be places where 5 milligrams is the restriction, but overwhelmingly preferences are moving towards 10. And that you see that in, Can finally launched their 10 milligram product. Wink finally launched their 10 milligram product. Breeze finally launched their 10 milligram product. And that was actually all in the same week in early April, which I think was a complete coincidence. But it kind of shows, as we go into the summer here, these brands are reading the writing on the wall. Even though a lot of them still message around the microdose, it's really, a kind of a prerequisite, I think, to be in this category, is to have something stronger. Now you take that. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. Finish that thought.
You take that, you separate it from, like, that's the first stage of what you're looking at, and then you're figuring out what is the product type and like what is resonating with people. The classic fountain sodas are great because they're just different than what a lot of people are offering. There's not as many brands in the soda space, and what people are really looking for in those sodas are traditional soda flavor. Like, they want it to be sweet, they want it to have sugar, frankly. And so you see other entrants in the soda space that are, 10, 15 grams of sugar because they want to be lighter in calories. But really, those don't resonate with the consumers that are look after a soda. They're after a traditional soda. And so that's where Cantrip is really starting to dig our brand mode a little bit deeper.
So how are you thinking about product dynamics? Because from a regulatory front, at least what I'm seeing, a lot of it is around that 5 milligram dose. But if you're seeing the high rate of success around the 10 milligram dose right now with consumers, if those markets do come back online, do you need to is it a balancing act with getting the price down to where that 5 milligram dose equals what that consumer was getting a 10 milligram dose for, if that market opens back up, to win that consumer back? Or do you think the products are going to speak for themselves, the demand is there, and that user is just going to consume more product if that 5 milligram dose is the only thing available?
And it's a good question. I think it's a complex analysis right now to figure out who wants what and on what basis. I think what we're going to find is that people are willing to drink more sugar in a 10 milligram than they're willing to tolerate in a 5 milligram. That's kind of why we keep the seltzers at 5 and the sodas at 10. But the seltzers are also a very crowded space, so Cantrip may rethink some of its positioning around its 5 milligram product lines. I think pricing wise, you actually see pretty close to like half price for seltzers or for 5 milligram versus a 10 milligram. It's not quite 1-to-1. It might be like a 4-pack of a 10 milligram might run you, $18-19, whereas a 4-pack of a 10 milligram might be 11 or 12. Or sorry, if a 5 milligram might be 11 or 12. So they're pretty close, but I'm definitely not seeing in any data that people are interested in drinking that many of these over time. It might be because even with the more rapid onset of beverages, you don't get as rapid as alcohol, right? You're still waiting 10 or so minutes to really start to feel that effect. And then it'll peak more like 30 or 40 minutes. And you just don't have that same sort of behavior with alcohol. So figuring out where customers are is a big part of, what we spend every day doing, what we do, quarterly longitudinal surveys with our customers. And Cantrip customers overwhelmingly consume in the evening. They overwhelmingly consume sort of to relax, and, figuring out what are the use occasions that actually work for people, and what are the use occasions, like the habits that you can build into their day-to-day lives, rather than, what I think a lot of people are, which is just trying to force the concept that this is a really super social product and people are going to be drinking these at parties and bars. And, I don't know about you, Anthony, but for me, I've just never really been the whole reason I wanted to do the beverage at a low dose is because I've never been that social in consuming cannabis. And I just don't find, I think there's like a small proportion of people that really thrive socially when consuming cannabis, but I think more than not, and I think this is going to be true across most consumers, most people want it to be a more intimate setting or at home. And I don't think people are going to be binge drinking these things at bars, at least in the near future.
No. So it's safe to say that what you're seeing through the data, I don't want to say it negates the social lubricant thesis, but you're seeing more people are using these products as a nightcap, as something to have at home in more of a relaxing setting versus going to a bar and just pounding drinks like you would see with alcohol.
That's exactly right. I mean, that's what we see. Other people may have data that suggest other things.
Mhm.
I've looked at some studies that have been published by, Listen Ventures did a great study of, I think, a couple hundred consumers who are all confirmed that they do consume THC drinks. And they found that of the 6 use occasions people use, only one of them was like going to the party. One of them was like hanging out with intimate friends. And then 4 of them out of the 6 were just basically hanging out by yourself or with your partner and
Okay.
relaxing or being creative. And I think building towards the occasions is really where you're going to build your brand mode. Some people go in the direction of like, we're going to put a bunch of extra functionals in this too, caffeine, lion's mane, L-theanine,
Yeah.
insert XYZ thing that you can add a placebo effect to. But where we want to build is really just find the occasion that's going to work for people and let them know, here's how you consume THC drinks. And I think that's going to work for everybody, because ultimately, as people get more brought into this and adopted, they'll walk into a liquor store, maybe try some THC drinks, figure out where that works for them. Maybe
Mhm.
they're now interested in other cannabis formats, right? So if you're say in New
Yeah.
Jersey, you're walking down the street to the dispensary and seeing, what other options you have. So I think this is a great ecosystem to bring people into,
Mhm.
and other people are welcome to chase that social lubricant thesis. I'll focus on where I think, the data actually tells me people are.
Yeah, I think that's sound. And anecdotally, in South Florida, they've been really great on boat days. They
Both
found their
days.
way into boat
Yeah,
days.
that sounds great. Yeah.
Every time we have a boat day now, I bring cannabis beverages. I used to bring a bottle of tequila.
Hmm.
Everyone is, and I know a lot of other people that are doing that as well, and they just fit very well
Yeah.
in that segment. So I mean, with that, with I guess that thesis and finding that occasion that people want to be consuming the product, how does that influence your marketing? Are you doing more experiential? Are you doing more direct marketing online? As I've seen, I think Meta actually has relaxed some of the marketing restrictions
Hmm.
around the ads. Are you doing more in store marketing as it relates to sampling? How are you thinking about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a key to Cantrip's early success here that's got us as far as we are, and in one of the top brands in the country for the THC beverage category specifically, is that focus on that point of sale and that liquor
Mhm.
store marketing. We ran a survey included the question, "How'd you hear about us?" And the number one way people who buy our products online actually find out about us is in the liquor store. The
Okay.
second is word of mouth. It's the third actually that's online ad. Now, Cantrip's not necessarily built or known for being like the best e-commerce company that's ever existed. We're
Yeah.
actually kind of unique in the sense that we do less than 10% of our monthly sales online as opposed to in stores. We're
Oh
very
wow.
brick and mortar forward, and particularly inside that brick and mortar channel, bucket, we're very liquor store forward as far as where our focus is, because we just
Mhm.
think that's where we're going to adopt the most new consumers. And that's really pushed things forward. But as things evolve now, competition gets more fierce. We're looking at our marketing and messaging and trying to figure out again how to build into those occasions and habits, how to message that, how to answer the question for people: what do you use THC drinks for? I mean, I think because there's so much out there about it being a social lubricant or a replacement for alcohol in that way, that people tend to think that maybe it doesn't work for them that way. So we want to help people understand as succinctly as possible, here's how cannabis beverages fit into your life, which I think by extension means fairly pretty much all cannabis. This is just a convenient form factor of it. And so we do a lot of demos in stores. We do hundreds of
Mhm.
like in-store tastings every quarter. Where we keep increasing that. And we do a lot of events marketing too. So we are showing up, particularly in Tennessee, at different. We did an art gallery. We've done tailgates. We've done a variety of different things that just get us exposure. But now that we're focusing less on a social lubricant too, that's also going to guide where we do that, which types of events. For example, a lot of times when we do what we call seedings, which is just basically getting cans out there, we'll do
Mhm.
those seedings now in apartment buildings, with obviously the permission of the apartment building. We'll, find people who are of age and hand them a can. They can bring it upstairs to their apartment and try it on their own time rather than
Okay.
necessarily trying it live at a concert venue. Or when we are at a concert, maybe we're focused more on exit sampling than entry sampling, right? Instead of grabbing a can on the way in, you're grabbing a can on the way out, and you're going to try that when you get home.
Got it.
And then also the memento of what the brand is, right? So figuring out what are those moments that we can really match with what we believe the use case is for this with where people are. And that's, I think, how we're going to succeed and really reinforce the brand.
Has anyone cracked movie theaters yet as it relates to cannabis beverages? Because to me, that just seems like an obvious fit,
Yeah,
and
that's
and
perfect
and a
fit.
large TAM. But has
Mhm.
anyone cracked that to your knowledge?
Well, that's usually where I do the heaviest product testing is when I go to the movies.
Okay.
I remember
Same.
actually
Same.
the first time I did made like what is now the final version of the Cantrip Cola. I brought it to like see the D&D movie with some buddies, and I brought them a couple things too. It goes great with popcorn. If you look at Minneapolis, I'm sure you'll find a few movie theaters in Minnesota, Minneapolis that are doing it, mostly independents. You got to remember the movie industry now is like mostly like 3 different companies, or maybe just all AMC and like a couple regional companies. And so AMC, I don't think is going to be there. It's just for the same reason that, Kroger and Publix aren't quite there yet. But they will be at some point. I can see the McGuffin's bar eventually carrying these in states where it's compliant, but I'm sure there are independent theaters in Minnesota, in Tennessee, probably in Chicago that do have some sort of offerings, because I do think that's a great use case in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. Where do you see so we've talked about hemp beverages probably for the better part of a year now. I know they've been on the scene for much longer than that. Where do you see the category going in terms of innovation, or is it going to be the strengthening of brand and you don't really see a lot of innovation around product? It's brands that are going to be doubling down, resonating with consumers, creating that connection with the consumers, and then continuing to grow the category that way versus, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, let's say like an energy drink that contains THC, which to a lot of people have still thought was gimmicky, versus something that has a fit within the market.
That's a good question. I mean, the great thing about beverage, I'm basically a product developer by background, and what I did in cannabis for years before beverage was just the whole infused menu, right? And the thing I always loved about beverage is that there's so many different formats as opposed to like gummies, which are all largely the same thing. Now you can innovate in gummies in different textures and mouth feels and ingredients that you use, but still kind of to me all the same thing. Whereas beverage, you have people making great non-alc beers now, and you have people making that have THC in them. You have people making non-infused wines. I have to hand it to them, just all launched, I think, a genius product, which is basically an Aperol ripoff, but with THC in it. And I think that's going to be a great use case that connects directly with who the can audience is. So I think we're going to see more in that. I mean, obviously nowadays is a fairly large entrant into what we call large format. So it's like a spirit style bottle that has, basically 1 dose per shot. They have 2.5, 5, and 10. Pamos was doing that way before nowadays was, but nowadays got some virality behind them. So there's like a bunch of different formats you can do with liquid here. Shots have become really popular too. But I think it's really going to be about how do you connect with the consumer as a brand? How do you make, in a sea of places that people want to, try these things, how do you connect with it? Because you can make all sorts of different beverage types. Look at KDP or Coca-Cola, right? Like Coke owns, I think, Fanta, I want to say, and they own like a whole bunch of other, beverage brands, and like those aren't all the same thing, but they're just different flavors of essentially the same thing. The energy drink thing you mentioned is interesting in particular because Cantrip did launch an energy drink under a different brand name for about a year, and the reason I cut it is not because it wasn't popular. Like we definitely had strong markets for it. Was mostly because there's just too much consternation from insurers, distributors, and retailers around the inclusion of caffeine. It's crazy, Anthony, because you and I are of a similar era where Four Loko was really popular for a while, and like the earthquake that Four Loko made we're still feeling the aftershocks. Anytime you include caffeine in an intoxicant, it's now the Four Loko of cannabis, right? And like people. It's not just gimmicky, but also people are uncertain if it's going to cause Four Loko, I think cannabis and caffeine are actually not a bad combo. I think people have been doing coffee and a joint for a long time.
They were.
The blackout potential that came with alcohol mixed with caffeine has just still caused so much consternation in the marketplace that we just saw a lot of places refuse to take it, and it just wasn't worth continuing down that effort. It's a little bit of a different product type. I'm not a guy who's hugely into the functional stuff anyway, so for me, I want to focus on great taste, great effect, naturally derived THC. But there's some market for it, and I think if there is a social lubricant aspect, it'll probably involve caffeine. There's a brand called Haze out of North Carolina that's been doing a lot of that. But to me, it doesn't make as much sense. I think innovation is going to be in creating great tasting beverage types that fit in that THC. And like I said, that includes all sorts of like mirror products from the alcohol world. But it's really, I think taste is the primary component of all of this.
Do you think we get there with the entrance of some of the big alcohol companies to get spirits like a tequila or like a vodka or something that mimics a tequila but is infused with cannabis at the same time, or it's just as far as from a formulation, it's just not possible with the compounds.
I mean, the question is like, how successful have these non-alc spirit replicas been at all, right? Like,
Yeah.
you look at someone like Lear's, or go check out Dry Alice. Is a great non-alc sort of news aggregator, and they have a ton of stuff in there. And in my opinion, you can make a great non-alc gin, but it's a lot harder to make a non-alc whiskey. And so, because it depends on like how those flavor profiles are driven. Gin is largely driven by the herbs that you use to extract. In fact, I have a small gin company I'm just offloading right now. But the reason I did is because I was an extractions guy for someone. I was like, this is basically the same thing as extracting cannabis. Just instead of keeping the oil on the bottom, I'm keeping the distillate on the top, because you're getting all those botanical terpenes. So I think, could you make a great gin? Sure. Could you make a great tequila? More dubious. And I think large format is going to have to figure out, like nowadays. So I bought a bottle nowadays because I was really curious, because their website markets them as having no cannabis taste. And I think that's actually pretty accurate. But the taste they do have is it just tastes like citrus. Now, that's not listed basically anywhere on the bottle except in the ingredients, but it kind of tasted to me like an orange forward sweet tart, which is not a bad flavor at all, but it's pretty sugary. But people really like it. And I mean, the point being that like there is spirits innovation, and their marketing is like tequila, right? Like they have everything that about them. Like, I was a bartender for a while. As soon as I saw their brand for the first time, I'm like, this is just Casamigos, but THC. The thing is, it doesn't taste anything like Casamigos. So you have to figure out also where you blend these in. And cannabis drinks are going to have the same struggle that all the non-alc drinks have, which is why I think wine and beer are great opportunities, because you can create more similar to alcohol products. The spirit stuff is definitely, it's like, I tried the Flyers Old Fashioned, which in my opinion doesn't taste as much like an old fashioned, but I've also tried to make an old fashioned without alcohol myself many, many, many times. It is almost impossible, because an old fashioned is like 75% bourbon, maybe 90% bourbon. And so like, how do you do that without bourbon? It's very difficult. You have to get all the other characters, but without that alcohol bite, it's very difficult. And then you have the cannabis bite is its own thing that is that you have to deal with. So, I mean, it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of white space still. I think we're going to see a few brands really crest in like more mainstream categories like seltzer and soda and other just fruit forward sweet drinks. But eventually there will be more and more niches in other alternative types of products. But the big guys, when they come in, they're going to buy your cycling frogs and your deltas, and they're going to. I mean, Delta, if you have not tried that, it tastes like dead on to me for like a Bud Light hard seltzer, which I think is a very good thing. So at least they're 5 milligram line, the Delta Lights. So I think some brands are really hitting it, and the brands that are most successful are really just creating great flavor profiles first, and then layering on the operations and the marketing.
Speaking of the big boys, I mean, I know we saw the WSWA did a fly-in, I think about a month ago now, into DC. Beverages were a big part of the lobbying efforts, from what I've heard, that were sitting down with senators. I mean, you obviously have high visibility. You're in liquor stores. You're around the big alcohol brands. I'm sure these reps go into these stores. Notice that Cantrip is probably popping up in every liquor store that they're in. How big is the interest right now, or are they knocking down doors of, let's say, brands that are in the THC beverage space to get a jump on it? Or do you think that they're going to really sit back and wait till there's true regulatory clarity around the space to really make a move?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard of that much going on in M&A for this space. Like, there was, an insinuation by somebody I know recently that there's a brand looking at like a nice clean 7-figure exit. Obviously, Senorita got a decent exit to Agrify. I think the biggest players, they still want to see how the Farm Bill is going to work out. I think that's going to be the biggest windfall moment for this. I mean, I think post Farm Bill renewal, if you have, say, like a Stabbin' Out version that allows beverages and edibles but nixes the vapes and basically changes the definition to total THC. If you have that and that codifies things forward, and I think also kind of pending what Texas does here, you will see an acquisition spree by some larger companies. I don't know if it would be necessarily Anheuser-Busch or Coca-Cola level, because, I mean, look at their acquisition space generally. Like, typically Coca-Cola or Pepsi are not acquiring anybody until they're already a 9-figure company. Like, they are letting the smaller companies work out the details of what works and not, and then they come back in. I think KDP is a little bit more known for their innovation, but buying a brand in the 10 to $50 million revenue range, I think is still basically considered innovation, innovation
Correct.
acquisition at this point, rather than buying an established brand the way that Poppy just got bought. And so you may still see a little bit, but I think you'll see smaller acquirers. My gut says that energy drink companies are going to take a hard look at this because they're typically, maybe it's just because of their product type and like how much do they drink of it, but they're a lot more frenetic when it comes to acquiring things strategically and figuring out how to drop them into distribution networks. So, I could see Monster Energy doing an acquisition, or I could see, I don't think Red Bull would ever do something like that. They're way too focused on their own brand, but in that kind of space. And I think there might be PE and even cannabis companies that are looking to do it, but the acquisition space, I think, is going to get very frothy post Farm Bill for maybe 6 to 18 months, where you're going to see multiples that maybe these companies don't even deserve. I think it's going to look a lot like basically like 2018 cannabis for a minute there, and then things will come back down to earth as everybody tries to figure out what brand equity they can get. And some of the top companies will sell, some of them won't. Some of them will decide to keep going on their own, and those will be business decisions and investment decisions everybody makes. But I can definitely see a big acquisition space. But right now, I think it's pretty quiet because look, the sword of Damocles hangs over your head, right? Like it's a tough sledding for any brand trying to raise right now, because they're going to end up, every investor is going to say the same thing. It's like, well, what happens if the Farm Bill does close this loophole in 6 months, and then this, $500,000 that I dropped is just going out? It's not to say there's zero investment activity. There was a PetVet article that showed that, Listen Ventures just did a couple investments. Delta Emerald Ventures just did one big investment, I think, and then InvestBev, I think, has picked a couple horses. And InvestBev's one of their portfolio companies, Juneshine, has actually made a THC product too. So you are also seeing some of the smaller, more agile alcohol companies get into the space. So there's a lot of interest, I think, in the category, but the details aren't really all that much easier when it comes to regulatory, Anthony, than it was when I worked on the marijuana side of things. It's more of coming from a less regulated into more regulated and figuring out how to make one product work for all these states, rather than trying to replicate a product with different regulations in multiple states, which is more the challenge of the marijuana.
And I guess with the industry as a whole, I mean, with the, I guess, cautious approach from investors on the OpCo side, does that mean that there's been, let's say, a stagnation of CapEx investment as per the manufacturing side of the beverage industry? Like, are the pipes built, and is the manufacturing infrastructure there to scale? Let's say if there is clarity
that's a
around.
really sharp question. The answer to that is you don't need to invest in CapEx on the manufacturing side, because it already exists. The one real material advantage to working in hemp over the marijuana system is that these manufacturers are already creating products in the alcohol and non-alc space, and they can, in many cases, they can just add on THC. Now, not everyone is doing it, but Cantrip's manufacturing partner in New York, it's a $70 million production facility. Nothing like that even come close to exists in marijuana, but they don't produce just THC beverages. In fact, I'm pretty sure THC beverages are like the smallest part of their business. They just happen to be co-owned by a guy who also runs a THC drinks company. So, he's invested in that opportunity, but they produce Snoop's Gin and Juice. They produce Waterloo Seltzer. They produce Real Tea and Betty Booze. And so these rails already exist. It's the greatest part about this is you don't need to put in this huge new CapEx. And some of these facilities are so effectively scaled. Like, I mean, I could produce 20 times as much Cantrip at the same facility as I do today, and without missing a beat. And the quality is beyond anything I was able to produce in dispensaries. And frankly, the product safety is there too, because you can't really get SQF certified properly in the cannabis side. You're not FDA regulated. You don't have to heed those standards. And there's fewer beverage experts who are going to move into the cannabis beverage space on the marijuana side, because you just can't get as big of facilities or as big of opportunities. Like Space Station made that attempt in California, but they closed down. So there's really nothing like it on the marijuana side, because why build a $70 million facility that can only service one state? It just doesn't make sense.
Makes sense. So basically the rails are already built. You plug into enterprise level beverage manufacturing, and there's tons of that already that's available in the United States.
There's tons of line time. Breweries are adding CapEx for it in some capacities, because the scale of the cannabis beverage industry is still essentially what you might call subscale. Like no one's producing at the level of Coca-Cola yet, right? So that need hasn't been there. Now you might have new capex going in once people are really doing, $100 million, even $1 billion years. You might start to need that, but like, I know certain larger cannabis beverage companies are already vertically integrating themselves just to get the more efficiency, because they're at the point where a small brewery running every single day can handle their volume.
Okay.
So they buy the brewery and they just do it that way. But there's also breweries who are adding on the capacity, because 90% of brands out there, because there's so many now, are not producing more than they're not selling more than 500 to 1,000 cases a month, which is
Okay.
pretty small fry stuff right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I guess on an ending note, supply chain regarding cannabinoids, is that mature? Are you getting enough of the product as it relates to D9 to go into there and scale, or is there kind of a little bit of ambiguity around that as we kind of sit in regulatory limbo?
No, that's a good question. Right now there's a mixture of people using converted cannabinoids and natural cannabinoids. And so we use natural cannabinoids. I haven't had any issues getting access to, clean tested cannabinoids that are grown compliantly with hemp. But part of that may rely a little bit on the existence of converted cannabinoids, because the offshoot streams from manufacturing natural cannabinoids are essentially, you pull out a bunch of CBD when you're doing that, and that CBD often goes back to conversion for converted cannabinoids. And so if you eliminated converted cannabinoids entirely, you could definitely see a run on that. We also had, I think, a huge overproduction in this country for hemp from 2019 to 2022. And so we're getting to the end of that surplus, and things may start to change. But generally, cannabinoid prices are around the same, I've seen, for naturally derived Delta-9 THC on the hemp side as they are in most marijuana states that I've worked in. In fact, they're substantially cheaper than they were when I started. But when I started doing Cantrip in Massachusetts, it was $35,000 a kilo for distillate in the state. And I think that's closer to $2 or $3 grand today, maybe $5. So, the things have also course corrected there.
Yeah, I knew guys that were guns for hire back in the day, 8 years ago, that would just bring extraction rigs and go to new markets that are coming online in the traditional market, just extract down, wait until the price of distillate starts to just roll over, and then just go to another state. I guess on an ending note, price-wise, where do you think prices are in terms of beverages, let's say a year from now? Do you think that we still continue to get the price down, or you think it's going to be hard really until you can really achieve economies of scale nationwide?
Well, that's a good question. I think price compression is slowing to an extent, particularly around that 5 milligram range. We're starting to hit the bottom of what people can afford to do based on simply the scale that we're at. The other parts are that, these tariffs are going to start coming into play pretty soon. We're at a 50% aluminum tariff at this point. Now that hasn't impacted the market too much just yet, because cans are typically produced a year ahead of time. In terms of the raw cans themselves, absent printing, Ball does their production planning for next year, right now. So they'll be running new cans for 2026, in the fall, most likely. And so 2026 is really going to see a lot of increase in raw material costs. The other side too is that we're seeing more states implement programs, which means more taxes. So that's going to make it harder to get that price down. Massachusetts just passed a bill in the House that's going to bring hemp beverages back potentially at 5 or 10 milligrams. And the excise tax rate is the same as the excise tax rate per gallon for vodka. So, that's pretty expensive on a gallon-to-gallon basis. It's going to put kind of a floor on that. The same thing is being contemplated in New Jersey. And we're talking $4 to $5 per gallon sold, and a case equivalent of a 12 ounces, 2.25 gallons. Which is also, you may also see more 7.5 ounce products, maybe more mini cans to deal with that, because that saves you 30-40% on that tax rate. And then Minnesota just increased their tax to 15% as a base instead of 10. Tennessee just flipped from a 6% tax to a 1 cent per milligram tax, which is an interesting choice. And that's a unique law that I'm really interested to see how it plays out. But between new taxes coming online, a kind of a slowing economy, frankly, and these tariffs, I think price compression is going to slow down, but ultimately the goal is to get these things down to white collar level. And so until we get there, it's not going to stop. And people are, the better the view, like at the Farm Bill renews, right, the more long-term view you have that this is going to work long-term, the more likely you are to put up money to even eat into your margins and sell at that lower price to make sure you capture that brand share. So I expect to see it to continue, but it's going to be the best operators that are able to actually navigate that without going out of business.
Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Well, I mean, Adam, this has been very informative. Obviously, big fan of what you guys are doing over at the brand. Wish you guys the best of luck and continued success. And hopefully we can get some sound regulatory.
Yeah, it'd be nice
regulatory
to get
news
sensible regulations in this country for all cannabis.
Yeah, it'd be really nice to get some sensible regulations around THC. Look forward to having you back. You're probably in a couple months, and I'll check back with you soon.
Thanks for having me, Anthony.
Thanks, Adam. That was great. I feel like that was one of the better conversations we've had around the beverage category. I know it's a huge category, and I know it's a thing that a lot of people really want to get the pulse of, and it's good to see in the comments, obviously, support for Cantrip and their products. I know it's a good product, that we stand by, and it's a product that I've got in my fridge. So that was great. But I mean, without further ado, I think Shad's behind the scenes, live from Germany. How's it going?
What's going on, buddy? Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine.
Nice.
So,
well, I'm flying on cloud 9. I just had Mike Tyson in for an interview. We're gonna have that out next week. Here's proof.
Nice.
Here's some proof. This is what he left behind. So I feel a little high after interviewing him. The smoke was coming in my face, so
Yeah.
I feel like I had to have the sunglasses on during the whole interview. But I did ask him a question. If rescheduling does happen under the Trump administration, and he looked at me straight in the face and said, "It's coming, buddy. It's coming." So I hope he's accurate when it comes to that. But long story short, he had some comments about the DEA raid yesterday, but kind of wild to think that fentanyl is still classified as a Schedule 2 and cannabis is a Schedule 1. But all in all, it was a really good interview. But a special hello going out to Jason Wild from Terracin for setting that up. And yeah, it was a really, really good interview. So we should have that out next week. But it's been wild. 2,500 exhibitors at this conference right now. It's different sentiment over on the other side of the Atlantic right now.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, with those raids, I think we got Trent coming on the podcast today to talk about VA, PA, get a big Ohio update into what's going on with the politicians kind of going against the will of the people. And had a big conversation with Mr. Woloveck. So, I mean, Arns, let's get him up here. How's it going, sir?
Hey guys, how's it going?
Good to see you.
Good.
Yeah, I'm just putting in my buy order for MSOX after that breaking news from Chad. So give me one second here.
Should I keep this?
Hopefully.
Should I keep this blunt?
Yeah, keep that blunt. Just don't get it. Just don't let TSA find it in your bag.
My bag coming back. Good to see you guys. I won't take too much of your time because there's a lot going on here, but at least just wanted to let people know the interview was awesome and some interesting intel to say the least. But he made it loud and clear about what's going on in the cannabis space at the DEA's office last week, and they heard him loud and clear. But his message is safe, regulated market, and he's happy he's pushed the narrative forward. So long story short, his presence and his face and his name and his relationship with Trump, hopefully it has some sort of influence, but it sounded optimistic according to him. So I'll leave it at that.
I mean, Trent, you're on the ground in Pennsylvania. I mean, that's one of the biggest conversations that we're having right now. Like, what are you hearing coming out of there? Because I know that I don't want to say we're on the clock, but we're kind of on the clock as it relates to the budget needing to get done in PA. And it seems like it's a lot of politicking that's going on right now in that market.
Yeah, look, I think you have your classic, like you said, politicking going on. Mm-hmm. The budget is a $50 billion plus budget. We all know about the shortfalls, of that budget that PA has passed over the last couple of years. It's only going to grow as we continue to see federal funding dry up for Medicaid or Medicare. I always get those two mixed up, but a third of that's funded by the state of Pennsylvania. And so that's just going to become a bigger gap. They already have gaps in public transit through SEPTA. They want to do school vouchers. That's more money. And so they like to spend, but the good news is, as always, skilled gaming is on the table, and adult use cannabis is on the table. And I don't know if you've, continued to hear the messaging from, leader of the Senate of the Republicans, Leader Pittman. But, he's continued to beat the drum of public health and safety.
Okay.
And public health and safety is applicable to both,
See you guys.
both adult use cannabis, but also with the skill games. So I think you can replace both of those words with either of the other, and voila, it's about $750 to $1 billion of tax revenue per year for the state, which goes a long, long way.
Yeah. How are you? We've been talking a lot about the Pennsylvania with Pennsylvania legislation. I mean, but we haven't really been talking about a lot of the actual Pennsylvania market. Like, how is the market performing? You're one of the larger operators there. You've been there for a while. You're one of the keystone operators in the state. Like, how is Pennsylvania performing in terms of growth? Is it as big of a deal as we make it out to be within the mix of, let's say, the top markets in the U.S. right now?
Yeah, look, I think it's the number one state right now that has a chance to turn the adult use spigot on. Let's call it within the next 6 to 9 months. We have, a lot of different stores there. It makes up, probably about 30%, if not 35% of our market, our footprint from a retail perspective. True Leaf, GTI, Cresco, Verano, and there's plenty of other in-state operators that have, just received 3 store licenses that are building out as well. And so it's a market that, continues to have high demand from a medical patient perspective. I mean, we've seen it as high as like 5 to 5.5%. Obviously, with all the states turning on around it for adult use, we've seen that, wither away a little bit, but still, at 4 to 4.5% total population that's in the medical program, 400 to 500, 1,000 patients. Keep in mind where I come from in Colorado, we never had over 100,000 patients ever. And so, that piece is, going to continue to bleed outside of the borders. And, we continue to have smoke shops and vape shops and everybody and their mother continue to sell THCA flower, synthetically derived cannabinoids, you name it, they sell it in these stores. And look, that's going to have an effect on our business. You have good operators like the last gentleman you just have on, and then unfortunately you have a lot of bad operators too. And so that's where we get a lot of that wash and a lot of that noise. But unfortunately, we all get lumped in together, and the hemp folks have continued to call themselves cannabis, and so they need to start acting like they're in the cannabis industry, quite frankly.
Yeah, I think I would love to see that. I would love for them to start acting like they're in the cannabis industry, grandfather them in to the cannabis industry. The ones that are good actors, let the market dynamics play out. Yep. And whoever creates a better product at a price point that's branded, that consumers want to buy, they will buy. But we need to get to the point to where we're talking about THC. We're not talking about hemp versus marijuana. But one state
a molecule is a molecule, quite frankly. And so
correct.
All we've ever asked for is let's run the 40-yard dash, but let's all start at the same starting point.
Yes.
Let's play.
Yeah. And then, so one state that we have seen in enforcement work was New York. I had Hirsch on Wednesday. He was spitting some facts about New York. New York is growing tremendously right now. It's yet to be determined where that ceiling is, but it has had concurrent growth, explosive growth year over year. And a lot has been due to the fact that they got their dispensaries online, and they've curtailed the illicit market, much of which were illicit product as well as hemp within Manhattan and within the state of New York at large. Is there a point of of like, is there a point of maturation in that market to where it makes sense from an operator's perspective to enter it? Because I mean, it's New York. It's going to be big. It's going to keep growing. It's going to continue to just demand dollars out of it. Like, how are you thinking about New York, if at all? Because I know you are in these large markets. I know you just fully built out Ohio, PA, VA, doubling down in those markets that you're in. But New York just seems to be sitting there glaring everyone in the face, and it seems to be getting more attractive as more time goes on.
Yeah, and look, it's good to hear actual operators within the state start to be able to run a real business and be successful. And so, that's been a long time coming. Obviously, there's always growing pains as we continue to see what works in regulated cannabis. And so, look, I would love to be in New York. Jushi would love to be in New York. We all know New York really well. We had a New York license, way back in the day in 2018 that we ended up, selling our piece to Cresco. And so, we track that market for sure. Unfortunately, to go into New York, just like to try to go down into Florida right now, it takes capital dollars. And in a world where, the market has been shut for quite some time, you have to be very conscious of where and how you deploy your CapEx dollars. And, we still have plenty of growth built into our platform with PA and VA, quite frankly, on the cusp of hopefully transitioning, at some point here in the very near future. So, and then, like you said, building out Ohio, we continue to be able to build out Illinois, where I think we have a really good retail brand. Massachusetts, there's a lot of movement from a legislation standpoint to be able to get more vertical. And so, I think we continue to look at and assess, we're, for better or for worse, Jushi was built as a biz dev acquisition machine. That's our backgrounds. And so, we assess the markets all the time. We determine where we want to deploy our capital. And, when you're getting a 1-to-1 return on CapEx dollars to EBITDA dollars, it's hard to, try to join in a new market like in New York or a Florida, for example.
Absolutely. And I mean, one of the markets that you guys have expanded in over the last year has been Ohio. Ohio, though, has been, I don't want to say a mess, as they have rolled out medical plus, we'll call it, not truly adult use. I'll just call it that for all intents and purposes. But Tom over Marijuana Moment's been covering it actually beautifully with the political mess that's going on. A lot of the senators and state representatives want to alter the bill against the will of the people that voted on that ballot initiative. I know it's gone one way to, let's say, the right. Now it's coming back way too far to the left. Like, are you hearing anything kind of like boots on the ground wise as to if it's possible to get this done and get some semblance of a bill as per what the people voted on in the first place in November 24?
Yeah, look, it fell apart in about 30 minutes earlier this week. So it can get put back together just as quick. As somebody who's, not really a politician, but have had to get ingrained with that over the last, 10, 15 years in the industry. A wild hair up one person's ass can, change it on a dime. And so, I think they're up against the shot clock. Maybe they get something done, maybe they don't. Quite frankly, as you alluded to, it's not a razor thin margin between Republicans and Democrats in Ohio. It's uber conservative Republicans and maybe a little bit more moderate Republicans, and then maybe somebody that sits right in the middle that would call themselves a Democrat in Ohio. And so when you kind of have that delineation, even within a caucus, whether that's the House or the Senate, and then you have leadership that doesn't see eye to eye in the House versus in the Senate, you're bound to run into potholes as you try to pass legislation. especially legislation that's going to go against the majority of your constituents. And so, we continue to kind of monitor Ohio, but we just opened a new store in Mansfield, Ohio, month and a half ago. And that's a kick-ass store. It's definitely one of the top performing stores, we have in the state. And so, we continue to execute on finding the best real estate, doing some dirty work to make sure we're able to, talk to the local municipality, work on zoning, a lot of things that just come with time and education of how we've done it over the last 7-8 years here at Jushi, and then dating all the way back to my days at TGS. Like, we found really good retail real estate, and at the end of the day, retail comes down to signage, visibility, foot traffic, parking. We're not selling anything else. It's main on main, and that's what you need to get to from a retail perspective.
Correct. And that's been, I'm not going to name names, but that's been the downfall of some of the operators in Florida. It was retail siting. They put their dispensaries in the wrong place. They put their dispensaries in inaccessible jurisdictions, and they've suffered because of it. It's not as simple as putting a gram on the shelf and it sells anymore. You got to be in those population dense centers.
Yeah. Unfortunately for us, but I wouldn't say it's unfortunate. It's actually fortunate, because we're then covered under federal, the federal law. But we have to be 1,000 feet away from schools and daycares, places of worship. And so it's not like I'm citing a Burger King, a McDonald's, a Five Guys, a Shake Shack, or a Raising Cane's, my favorite fast food. And so we have very limited areas to put.
Raising Cane's blows my mind, how they just got sold to private equity for that much money. And it's chicken fingers. It's
literally chicken. I mean, it's the best chicken fingers, don't get me wrong, and the best toast and the best sauce. But now you got the fat kid excited. But
I went to school in the South. I like Zaxby's. Zaxby's is something we don't have in South Florida that I really like. By the way, just hold on, off topic, deschedule now. Sam Bennett announced last night that he's not leaving. Sam Bennett's staying on the Florida Panthers. So we might have a dynasty team down here, and we wind up bringing everything back. But let me reel it in. Where are we at? Location.
Yeah, location on retail. That's what it is. We continue to refine that in Pennsylvania. Go find somebody with that can find 6 better locations in Virginia. Ohio, we're getting really dialed in there. As a kid from Ohio, I kind of have a sense for, and still have a bunch of friends back there. And so, we see it in Massachusetts. Like, we're able to survive and, quite frankly, thrive in Massachusetts because we have arguably a top 2 store in the state, probably.
Yeah.
We had somebody open up across the street from us. We had little to no degradation in the store, because everybody knows where we're at. Everybody knows how our program is at. We've been operating there for quite some time. And so, competition's great, but in cannabis, people are creatures of habit majority of the time. And so, you create that real experience time and time again with, proper standardized products at the right price point. I will always, harp on the price point. You don't lose those folks.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing we usually talk about, it's a recurring theme with having you on, has been federal reform as well as hemp. Now, everybody, I kind of want you to take a step back with what Shad just said about Mike Tyson with rescheduling. Let's not get excited. Take it at face value. Hopefully it comes. Don't take whatever he said as just gospel. One thing, though, that I do find interesting, and Michael Pollan's wrote about this in a lot of his books, is what happened around poppies and opium when they brought opioids to market in the United States. You saw swift, direct enforcement on the consumer side of poppies. You couldn't buy the flowers anymore. They started to very highly regulate them. and they clamped down on that with bringing opioids to market. And I know it's not apples to apples, but we've seen crackdowns on illegal grows, which could be just an extension of the ICE raids that are going on in California. We saw a large bust in Texas around hemp this week. We've also seen states passing sweeping reform as it relates to hemp. Do you think that this is starting to be foreshadowing to we need to clamp down on the illicit market as well as just the Wild West as it relates to hemp, setting the stage for federal reform? Because that would make logical sense.
That's a loaded question, so I'll walk through it as quick as possible. I think there is hemp reform at the state level because of the mess that the federal level made of the 2018 Farm Bill and the allowance of the continuation of the loophole. I'll put it that way. And let me put this out there. There are plenty of companies that are doing it right, that are doing the drinks and doing the gummies, the infused. I'll just call them infused products that are trying to do it right, and good on those people.
I give them plenty of credit. I mean, that's why I was surprised that Jim Higdon called our audience a bunch of MSO fucksticks this morning. His language, not mine, because on several occasions on this program, I've said that he's one of the ones doing it right. He's using organic D9 inputs in his products. He provides COAs. He provides a wholesome product, and he's one of the guys that if you gave him a state-run license, his company could probably be transferred into that thing right away today.
And the drinks make sense, but
very much so.
But like when you continue to try to pull wool over people's eyes, with synthetic cannabinoids going into vapes or trying to mask, flour as THCA, and you make illegal, falsified, fraudulent C of A's, and then you try to hide behind the distributor, like that just don't play when people actually get educated on it. And so, look, I think there comes an inflection point. I mean, you're seeing smoke shops and vape shops. Florida's a great example. Like, there's more new smoke shops that opened in Florida in the first 6 months of the year than the year prior. And then that hockey stick the year prior. And then Texas.
I could do it right now with probably $250,000 and just go sign a lease, open up a shop.
Absolutely.
Just get all the product, put it on shelves, and just go to market right away. And I've got a full-blown cannabis dispensary with no hoops to jump through. And I'm not paying $280. The barriers to entry are super low. The problem is there's very few people that are actually doing it right. Yeah.
And so like, I think state level folks that care about public health and safety, which is a must, get educated, and they understand that. And you have to be able to enforce against it. Look, a lot of that product, and I don't think this is a coincidence, a lot of that illicit product is coming from facilities that we know are human trafficking. And I mean, I don't know the first time I said it on your program or any other program, but every dollar for the legal market is one less dollar for criminals and cartels. And that's Mexican cartel and the Chinese triad. I mean, there have been story after story. I mean, it literally feels like a daily basis now. Oh, hey, this grow got popped in Maine, or this grow got popped in Colorado, or this grow got popped in Cali. And every time you see a picture, it's people of Asian descent. And so I don't think that's happenstance.
Do you think that's the linchpin that gets Donald Trump and the administration moving to where it's like, this needs to be stamped out, and the only way to get this just completely flushed out of the system is to legitimize the system and push further towards legalization, standardization of THC?
Even setting aside what I heard from Shad, 15 minutes ago, 100% absolutely the case. In 2023, the United States imported CBD oil from China to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. I don't think that was the intent of the 2018 Farm Bill.
Yeah.
I mean, farmers made $445 million last year in selling hemp. When you actually take the amount of biomass, do the extraction rate, and then plug it into the number that, the number one person in hemp who, is MC Global, MC Nutraceuticals, MC Botanical. Yeah. I mean, he's online and he reps that the hemp industry is $80 to $100 billion. That's not me making anything up. That's not.
Oh no, I've seen his post on LinkedIn. He's bragging about it at this point.
And so when you do the math doesn't actually work. And so that has to be coming from somewhere else. And so, yes, I do think that is something that the current administration has been educated on and will drive them to act on stuff. I know it for a fact. I sit in DC. I have to have these tough conversations. I get to show hemp products, to legislators, and because they don't know, they live in a little bubble. And so it's an education thing. And so, if people want to call me a snitch or a prohibitionist, like, by all means, I love it. But I have not seen any of those people ever in the Capitol building, ever in a state level building, pushing regulations or legislations. You run into me in a building, you get my respect. Until then, stay behind your keyboard and keep typing.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. So where do you think we go with the appropriations language? It's live right now. Do you think that gets pushed through? Or you think it gets nixed like we've seen a couple times already? I think we see it get a carve out for beverage and low dose edibles and synthetics, THC flower, et cetera, or just flushed.
The current state is not sustainable.
No.
For the industry, and whether people like it or not, Sam has continued to push the message that state regulated businesses are the same as the hemp industry, and we are going to have to fix that because
very much so.
That is why we've continued to fall flat in our face at the federal level.
I mean, but that's what we need to be doing. Obviously these politicians don't have the time, but they need to go into these markets, whether it's Pennsylvania, Florida, Ohio, walk them into a hemp dispensary, go through it as if you're a general consumer, and then walk through a cannabis dispensary and look at the difference between the experience and product that goes. Somebody mentioned the other day, they're like, well, MSOs don't have the COAs sitting there readily available at the point of sale. I go, yes, because they're mandated to have a full panel COA via a QR code that's going to be on that product that you're purchasing, and the trust is there because it's mandated. You don't need to see the COA.
By the way, it doesn't get released out of my grower processor facility or anybody else's grower processor facility until you have that C of A loaded into the seed to sale tracking system that then releases the product to be able to sell to the retail store.
Correct.
And so last time I checked, Coke has a bottler, Pepsi has a bottler. They just don't take verbatim the inputs of their drink. They have banks are the same way. Know your customer. Why do I get turned down every single time for a loan for a house or a car? Because I've drove my income for 15 years via cannabis. It's know your customer. Just because I put my money into a bank doesn't let the bank get off the hook for having my illegal money, quote unquote,
absolutely
in the bank. And so the education continues. I don't have to sell it. Like you said, I let people walk in there with me and they get the game really quick.
Yeah, I think it's important. Brady was actually telling me about in the Florida legislature, when you walk into the building in Tallahassee, they literally just have a table sitting there with, these are hemp products. that are sold in the state of Florida, and it just smells of cannabis wafting through when you walk in the building. But no, this has been quite informative. I mean, I know obviously you've got your boots to the ground in PA and Ohio. I mean, someone actually just messaged me that the Senate leader said rec likely won't be included in the budget in Pennsylvania. I'm assuming that's just posturing or a data point.
A thing of beauty from the Senate Republican leadership.
Yeah.
Shapiro had to come back with a statement over top of it to say, I'm still 100% in with cannabis.
Yeah.
And so, like, to understand the process, it's just like this and then this and then this. It's just, it's a horse trade. And
correct.
Luckily for us, not due to anything that I could ever do, they just need the money. I can't say it any other way.
It's a good position for us to be in. They need what we're selling. I mean, that's unfortunately, like I said, economic incentives need to be aligned in order for us to get progress. Unfortunately, it's just the way the world works. I know a lot of people want to be idealists and just think that people have genuine intentions. But unfortunately, in America, if you need something done that has a lot of friction around it, the only way to get that objective complete is economic incentives being aligned. Anything outside of that usually doesn't get done. And I mean, unfortunately, a lot of people won't agree with that, but that's just the way the world works.
Yeah, absolutely. And the last thing I just want to point out really quick, I know we're probably running tight on time. You and I could probably sit here and talk the rest of the day. But Abigail Spanberger in a new poll just went up 17 points. So
really,
yeah, she's up 17 points.
So she's likely going to be the next governor of Virginia, which will be good. Hopefully we finally get that flip.
And the woman, they just had the lieutenant governor primary for the Democrat on Tuesday this week. And a state senator from Richmond, she won the nominee. And so she you can go back and see where she's voted on adult use cannabis while she's been in the legislature. Her name is Hashme. And so I'll leave that one at that as well.
Perfect. That's one market that I look forward to getting into in 2026. Once that election takes place, we can kind of see rubber hit the pavement moving forward. But Trent, this has been great. Obviously, much appreciated insights. And look forward to having you back on in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, big week next week in Pennsylvania. Both the House and the Senate are going to be in session, and so we continue to patiently wait for new legislation to be dropped in the House and a very similar bill be dropped in the Senate. So
perfect. We're looking eyes peeled to that. Hopefully we have some news. We have some updates to talk about next Friday.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Have a great weekend. This has been great.
Thanks, Anthony. Have a good one.
Talk soon. You too.
Take care. Bye.
This has been a long one today. Hope everybody enjoyed the two guests that were on. I mean, I was looking forward to these conversations all week with Trent and Adam from Cantrip and Jushi. And just, I guess on an ending note, I guess someone alluded to the cannabis market being overregulated. I mean, I don't necessarily not agree with that. I would like it to be a free market. We got what we're given. Like I said, economic incentives need to be aligned, and we'll get progress with this. But that being said, I guess everybody have a great weekend. Thanks for tuning in. And Monday we'll be back to the regular scheduled program with myself and Chad. Cut it, Arns.
So, what'd you think of all that information? Some interesting stuff that we just learned once again here at the TDR Traded Black podcast. Let's keep the conversation going. So leave your comments below. We'd love to get your feedback. As usual, if you have time, make sure to like, subscribe, and smash on that bell for all notifications. And stay connected with us here at the Trade to Black podcast. Thanks for watching, everyone.